So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 68 of the Uncovered podcast. I'm Behram Kazi. You can find me at DefMango on Twitter. And with me, as always, is Jared Kimber, who you can find absolutely everywhere. And before we get into all of the things that we have to talk about with respect to cricket, Jared has an announcement. We're splitting up Uncovered for all the audio listeners, and Jared will get into the details. So there you go. Here you go.
Yeah. Basically, we've had real trouble keeping Uncovered down to less than 7 hours. So the idea going forward is to have, when you're listening on the audio podcast, you'll have the original episode go up, which will usually be the one where we talk about the games from the weekend. And then the next one will go up, which will be about the cricket news in the week so far. So cricket news will be about, 24 hours out of date or whatever. But it's just, I know that a lot of people are having trouble with an hour and a half long podcast and everything else. A little bit different on YouTube. So YouTube will just record it all in one go just because it makes it easier. But if you are listening, there'll be two Uncovers and everything else during the week will be moved back. I can't remember what the rest of the schedule is. I know I set it up and sent it through to Ishit, but I can't remember what it is. But essentially, the only thing that will be changing is if you're a podcast listener, Uncovered will kind of be broken into two things. We will come up with a different name for each one as we do. But at the moment, it's just Uncovered sort of parts 1 and 2, and then as we go forward.
Yeah, so as Jared said, welcome to Uncovered Part 1, and we'll start off with the cricket news. Of course, we couldn't fit in all of those things in the title, so we have all the results from cricket over there. But there's a series going on, a test series between Australia and the West Indies, and it kicked off at the Adelaide Oval, and Australia crushed the West Indies by 10 wickets. But there was a story that came out of this test, the Shamar Joseph story. Bharat Sundaresan wrote an article on it, and it basically goes over his rags to riches story, how he grew up in this remote village and then moved to a city from where, basically his village was a place where only there was one mode of earning. Everyone used to cut wood over there. He made that brave move to the city, somehow ended up, being mentored by Curtly Ambrose, and then played 5 first-class games before debuting in Adelaide versus the mighty Australian team, World Test champions. And in his very first debut innings, he took 5 for 95 and struck on his very first delivery, removing Steve Smith with his first ball in international cricket. He also scored 51 runs, which included 36 in the first innings. And basically, Jared, it surely would have been an innings defeat if not for Shamar Joseph.
I mean, he had a fantastic debut, didn't he? He's kind of ruined his life probably by being so good in his first game. There's going to be so much pressure on him. Look, I think what we're seeing here is a very similar story to probably what we've seen in Asia many times before, right? Which is someone who played tape ball cricket, played in the beaches in his case. Someone then says to him, mate, I think you're a bit better than this. And, he goes off. And I think, was it his neighbor or a friend of the family who paid for him to go to one of those camps?
I mean, he was neighbors with Romario Shepherd at one point.
But I think there was someone involved. I'm trying to remember back to Bharat's article. It was obviously a couple of days back ago now. It needed a lot of things to go right in order to get to the point that it has at the moment. And I think from that point of view, just absolutely magical, I think, from that. But, very much like an Asian story. And the one thing I would say is, this is kind of what happens when we have professionalism, because you have a guy who has the ability to do, to obviously play cricket at a much higher level, who is missed through in the system. As you said, he grew up with Romario Shepherd. So he's not, he's in the back blocks, but there are lots of Guyanese cricketers from random places have come through before. But for whatever reason, he was missed. And if he's 18 and he hasn't really made it before, probably in the old days of West Indies cricket, nothing really happens. Right. But now it makes sense to invest in your skills and, for those sorts of things. And Curtly sees, the skill in him and everything else. But he also sees that he can change his life through playing cricket, and make a proper living. Whereas even back 20, 30 years ago, maybe if he got to the top 5 or 6 best West Indian players, he could have a really good living. Chances are league cricket was the best he could do. Now, who knows what his ceiling is. And he's obviously a very exciting player, moves the ball around a little bit. He's an interesting talent. I don't know about his batting, but certainly his bowling is very, very interesting going ahead. And, I've been watching a lot of the under-19 bowlers this week. And you watch them and you realize how they've got the basic skills to be really successful, but they don't really know that. Some of them don't know where to put the ball, and some of them don't know how to put the ball in the same position every delivery, right? And you look at him and you go, this is a guy who hasn't played a lot of cricket. Reminds me a little bit of Mohammad Siraj in that his best ball is just naturally quite good. But his ability to sort of zip it around and everything means that he should be a danger in Test cricket consistently if, his body stays up and everything else. And who knows how he will grow from there.
I mean, if that was his 6th ever first-class game, then that's a very positive sign. And I love how, you mentioned you didn't know anything about his batting, but he bought like an elbow guard or something right before the test because he was like, I'm going to have to play Stark, Hazelwood, and Cummins. And then he ends up with 51 runs in both innings. And also, Jared, this is a guy who has only left, the Caribbean once prior when he was with West Indies A. And this is his second time outside of, his usual environment. The way he kind of, wrote his own story and took the Adelaide Test by storm. And basically, even though Australia won this test, he is the headline. It's just, it's a magical story. I can't come up with a better adjective.
Do you know, there's one thing I really like about Australian cricket, and you see it in the Big Bash as much as you see it anywhere else, is Australian cricket is a little bit more story dependent than other cricket cultures. I think most of the other cricket cultures are kind of more news dependent, right? Like, what's the news this week? You go back and you look at Sandeep Lamachani, who obviously not a good story anymore, but back when he played, Mujib and Rashid Khan and Haris Rauf and all these different players who've come
Just recently, Amir Jamal, another great story.
And Australian cricket culture is very good at kind of building those guys up. They forget about them 5 minutes later. Don't get me wrong. No one's talking about Adrian Barath anymore, right? But at the time they were. But they're very good at that sort of thing of really going, this is the best story, we're going to go with it. And I really do. I think it's a perfect place for someone like him to make his debut and, be properly, thought of and everything else. Just to shout out, one of my friends made his test debut in this game as well. Kavim Hodge, who I won't put. I think I've got a photo of one of my boys sticking his finger in his ear from when we were at St. Lucia together. Look, he was introduced to me as, and I always remembered this because it was the weirdest thing. Oh, this guy reads books, which does show you a little bit about cricketers. It was such a thing that they had to tell me that they found a cricketer who could also read books like I could. But he, look, just a sponge, just someone who really a thorough professional. I don't want to throw, young fella away here, but not the most naturally gifted cricketer. So for him to get to test level shows you how much he has worked and grinded and thought about his game. Didn't have a great game or anything. I think he played maybe a couple of one days before this as well.
Took a great catch. Someone's also, Alexander Cockburn has said that in the comment section. I remember someone tweeted that bring back Pakistan. We're not used to people taking these great catches.
Well, he, so that was one of the things that we noticed about it. So we played him at St. Lucia. We had another bowler called Chris Lamont, who I think was a better natural bowler. But Kevin gave us a little bit of batting. He gave us incredible fielding. And obviously, probably more of a part-timer bowler. Did he bowl in this test? I can't even remember. I don't think he did.
I don't think he did.
So, he can bowl and, but more fifth, sixth bowl, more sixth bowler probably than even a fifth bowler. But the point being that, he's just someone who's always worked on his career. And they're kind of, those two stories are at the other end to it. Like, Kevin Hodge probably never going to have too many magical moments in international cricket. The sort of guy might end up being a selector or a coach, hopefully, because he is, a very smart young man. He's not young anymore. He's about 30 now. He's almost over the hill. I don't know why I picked him. No, only joking. But so I love the fact that those stories are out there, and those sorts of players, are getting their chance. But again, Kevin Hodge doesn't play for the West Indies now if it wasn't for professionalism. They had to keep him around the system. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. There is a lifeline for West Indies cricket. It doesn't mean that they're suddenly going. I think maybe it was Jeff Lemon or someone else wrote the piece this week of how hard it is for the smaller teams to compete with the bigger teams anymore. And that is not going away. But professionalism, when it gets to the whole game, also changes what's happening with West Indies as well. But clearly, Like, no one thought. I mean, we thought Pakistan was going to struggle, but we thought West Indies was going to struggle even more. And maybe the only surprise is that Australia didn't make like 550.
Pretty much. And I mean, I did not expect, the game to go to the fourth innings, but they forced it to go over there. And I mean, just back on Joseph, I think Bharat did justice to that story. It was a fantastic piece. Those of you who haven't read it, you can go read it on CrickBuzz. And I mean, he was here on Uncovered not too long ago. So maybe next Australian summer, you'll see a piece by me.
Yeah, exactly. Who's your player that you've been stalking, waiting for a chance?
Well, the Border Gavaskar Trophy is happening next Australian summer. So I don't know, maybe Jaiswal is my story. But I mean,
it won't be him. It'll be some random kid that we don't expect to play.
Absolutely. Maybe it's Pukovsky after his 10,000th concussion. But I mean, prayers to him. Of course, he's copped another blow to the head. We've got Hypocost, Alexander Cockburn, Quantify, Arco, and Pratik Jha, my man Pratik Jha, and Armin. All of you guys are in the comments. Thank you so much for being here and bearing with us. And you mentioned Kevin Hodge. There was another batter in this game who was playing his second game, so not quite his debut, but he was the second highest scorer in this test match, Kirk McKenzie. Played some delightful strokes, scored a 50 in the first innings, 26 in the second. Have you seen him at all prior to this test?
Yeah, so I remember, I'm trying to think who it was. Someone from the West Indies, might have been Jimmy Adams, actually, when he was around, contacting me and asking, sort of suggesting that I should watch this guy coming through. I think, we've seen a lot of young West Indian players sort of come into the side with like low first-class averages. And, like comically low, like they shouldn't be playing as professional batters type players. And he was kind of holding his own a little bit more when he was early on. And I can't remember, maybe if it was Michelle I was talking to or someone else, but I think there's a few of us that thought that there might be a little bit more to him. The problem is, again, and I know where, it's kind of ridiculous because we're talking about a guy who just played 5 first-class games who did really well. But, again, you're talking about someone who's made 1 first-class 100. But there are parts to his game. I mean, that if you have a look at their side, they've got Alec Athanaze, Joseph, who we just talked about. There's a few cricketers coming through of, sort of, what would you say, sort of, I don't know the best way of putting it, but like, a basic level of skill that is a little bit higher than we were seeing over the last couple of years. Obviously Tajan Ryan is another one. And so I think they look a little bit stronger, but I don't see in McKenzie someone who's going to average like 45 in Test cricket and star. But if they can get him averaging 38, then they've got another Brathwaite, right? And I think they made him a slight mistake with Tajan Ryan to keep him out the side as long as they did. I understand the reasons, and there were many things going on there. But I think if you, in the West Indies now, first-class cricket doesn't seem to be preparing people for international cricket. So you're better off if you find someone young to throw them in a little bit. But that means we have to be prepared for the fact that Kurt McKenzie is going to struggle at times as well, right? And, he's played 2 tests, hasn't he, I think?
Yeah.
He played against India, is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so, look, I think him and Alec Athanaze are both guys who maybe their top end is 35 to 37, but if you put that together with Chanderpaul, who also might get to an average similar, and then and while Brathwaite's still there and thereabouts, there's a few guys who can hold their bat, right?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, considering the fact that West Indies have lost a lot of their players, Jason Holder in particular, who gave a great interview to Wisden. Everyone should read that piece as well. The fact that they're continuing to somewhat survive as a test-playing nation, I find that quite staggering. And if you get these Kirk McKenzies and Alec Athanazes and Shamar Josephs to play for longer stretches of time, then maybe, they'll continue to stay relevant because it does look quite daft. And I mean, Kirk McKenzie averages under 12 in T20s with a strike rate of less than 90. So maybe this is his calling. Who knows? Anyway.
Oh my God, you're right. What the hell is that?
I have no idea. They can be certain that they won't lose him to, the T20 boom. That's
Certainly not in the next little while. That is remarkable. Ask me the next question, but just so that I am definitely going to be looking that up now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, time to shift our focus to Australia. And we spoke of Kirk McKenzie being the second highest run scorer in this test match. The highest run scorer is someone who has made a bit of a habit of scoring runs in tough conditions. Travis Head, the man with the mustache and the hero from both the World Test Championship final and the World Cup semi-final and final, has once again scored a counter-attacking ton in very testing conditions. And he scored 119 off 134 deliveries. And he's transforming Jared from this cult hero into someone Australia can rely on consistently. And he's carrying that insane form from 2023 into the new year. And it's quite the transformation, I'd say.
So Kirk McKenzie. So his top score is 28 in T20 cricket. And that's those numbers come over like 3 years. Like, it's not like he just had a bad run. It's like been consistent over a period of time. Anyway, sorry. Travis said, yeah, he's also good. Travis said, look, I think I always thought with Travis said that clearly Australia were very, very keen on him. And so he played an innings in the Big Bash where he made 140 odd, I think. I can't remember what his score was, but it was a big, big T20 score. And Australia kind of went all in on him. And I was like, whoa, this guy can't play spin. And as we found out afterwards, couldn't play when right armers were coming around the wicket to him. Like, he had so many deficiencies. And I think it does show you that Australia is maybe slightly better at, I think they're slightly better at maybe 2 or 3 different things when it comes to developing talent compared to other countries. One is they do back talent. So they were like, no, you can't play the innings he played in the Big Bash. I think he played a couple of other innings as well without being ridiculously talented. Another thing they did was I think they made him vice captain early on as well and all sorts of stupid things.
I remember that. In fact, I feel like they're still earmarking him as a future captain.
Yeah, very, very possible. But so he came in, and then when he was dropped, and he was, he was terrible against a couple of things. We see this with Sri Lanka's maybe a really good example of this. Of someone will come in and like you can tell they've got talent, and then they don't make runs for a little while, and then it's like 7 years later we see them again, right? Australia is much better off, much better at going. No, I think this. Usman Khawaja. For all the talk about Usman Khawaja, no one would be talking up Usman Khawaja if he played non-stop Test cricket all the way through his career because he had huge dips, right? Yeah. But also, Australia made him earn his way back in by making lots of runs, but then backed him when he came back in, right? And I feel like Travis had very different kind of cricketer, but they've done a similar thing with where they didn't, when he made runs against England at home in the Ashes, they didn't want to take him to India. And it's not that they thought he was a dud or anything, but they were like, well, he's just made runs at home against England. We're now going to take him to India and he's going to have to face Ashwin. Do we want him to be completely deflated by not being able to hit Ashwin? But then the other thing is going, well, why don't we just let him off the chain, essentially, and let him play the way he wants to play? And I think that's one thing that Australia does really well. And I think Travis Head is the success of the Australian system. And let's be honest, he comes out of the most rancid first-class system in Australia. Apologies to everyone from South Australia, but you all know it's true. In fact, I had Tom Moffat on the other day, the FICA, what is he, CEO of FICA, the Players Association, on a podcast. It'll come out in the next couple of weeks. And I said, don't worry, Tom, I'm not going to ask you what the hell is going on with South Australian cricket for the last 20 years. But, Travis Head probably didn't come out of the strongest one. So again, that almost gives them an opportunity to overlook him. Like if you look at Callum Ferguson and Mark Cosgrove, I thought Callum Ferguson did really well in one-day cricket for a little while, and I thought should have been given more opportunities. Mark Cosgrove, I think, again, proved that he was certainly international quality. Because they were in a rancid South Australian system, they kind of could have done that. They didn't do that with Travis Head. They decided that they earmarked him as you said, a potential captain, but also more important than that, someone who could make a difference. And then they helped him with his technical problems. But what's the thing that's really helped him? He's still got technical problems, but he just smashes it, right? Yeah. And so it's harder to corner him now than it was before. And, he was timid when he first came into Test cricket. He was timid and full of holes. He was basically, I don't know, Emmental cheese? What's a cheese with holes? Is Emmental good cheese?
I mean, it's okay cheese.
But is it the one with the holes? And it melts quite quickly? I think it melts. One of the melting cheeses with holes. Swiss cheese? Does Swiss cheese melt? I don't know. Anyway.
Swiss cheese does have holes, though.
But does it melt quickly? I'm looking for a high... This is
I mean, I'm not
this could be a
cheese
spin-off
connoisseur to that
podcast.
level.
Yeah, it could be a whole separate one. The point being that that's what he was like. He just, he didn't handle pressure particularly well. I don't think he understood his game particularly well. And on top of that, he had flaws within his game, right? And they've just backed him in so many different ways. And I do think, we're seeing them and you can go Mitchell Marsh as well, right? Of two players that they have backed, that they have repeatedly brought back. There was so much mocking of Mitchell Marsh for a long time. I don't think Travis Head ever got to that because he kind of got dropped with the minute it looked like he was any good. He wasn't any good. But I do think they're very good at going, no, okay, he's in a bad run of form. He doesn't need to be in the side now. And that's really kind of what you should do with your players, right? I think there's this whole idea in cricket, and I suppose you could talk about lots of sports, but I think certainly non-team sports, so non-franchisee sports, right? Of like, he needs to be great at 21 if he's going to be great at 31. And it's like, but not if he develops slower, right? Not if he doesn't believe in himself. There are incredible cricketers who just take a long time. If you look at Ricky Ponting, he essentially was great in his peak batting age. And I think there's a few other cricketers like that. Dennis Amos, I think, might be another one. They weren't particularly good beforehand. They weren't particularly good after, right? They were fine. But a lot of players need to find that period. And once they have that period, they absolutely explode. And so when you're dropping people and selecting people, you need to have that in mind. It's one reason I like the fact that Renshaw's still around, right? Because they're like, no, Renshaw clearly is an international quality batter. We're probably not going to pick him automatically again until we're sure that he's ready. But we also don't want him to be out of the system. And I think that's what a lot of smaller teams, that's one thing they can learn from. Keep people around the system so that they are still developing the same way, but without having to face Ashwin or, Dale Steyn on a green one.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And I mean, Australia have clearly kept the faith and liberated Travis Head, and now he's repaying that faith and then some. And I mean, he's got a home ground ton over here. I mean, South Australia kid who's scored a ton in Adelaide and an important one. Anyway, last point on Australia. Of course, Head may have scored that 100, but what really won Australia this game was their fantastic pace bowling. Cummins and Hazelwood took 4 wicket hauls, both of them in the first innings. And then Hoff basically doubled down on that with a fifer in the second innings. Both some absolute peaches in this game and would make for great highlight reels. He ended with figures of 9 for 79, which are his career best figures overall. And he's surpassed 250 test scalps for Australia in the process. What a legend of Australian cricket.
Yeah, he's one of those players who just comes at the wrong time, right? Like he's got Pat Cummins at the other end, and he's a not quite as good a version of Glenn McGrath as Glenn McGrath is, right? Like if Hazelwood comes along in the mid-70s with these kinds of numbers, it's an absolute legend, or maybe mid-60s is a better way of looking at it. But Australia's had so many great bowlers around him at all times. But his ability to combine height with accuracy and lateral movement is really, really special. I remember when he was coming through, and I'm trying to remember if Mitchell Starc was part of it. I think when the 4 of them were coming through, but maybe Mitchell Starc wasn't part of this. But I know that Pattinson, Cummins, and Hazelwood, when they were all coming through, I remember having a podcast with Ed Cowan. And this is, these guys were like 19 at this stage. And I said to Ed Cowan, who do you think will be the best? He said, everyone at that stage thought Cummins would be the best. And he thought that Hazelwood might actually be the best of the 3. Sadly, with Pattinson, we never got to see his best. He just was never fit long enough. And if you've ever seen Pattinson bowl one good spell, you will understand why people still talk about him, despite the fact that he never quite made it. But Hazelwood probably isn't better than Cummins, but it has been absolutely fantastic. And what I've always liked is the juxtaposition of him and Starc together. There's a little bit of Wackar and Wasim. Very different kinds of bowlers who have different skill sets, who are good at different times in the game. All those different things that they both have, really, really works quite well, I think, for Australia at the top. And then, of course, Pat takes the ball first change, and good luck to you if you're a young West Indian trying to make your way in the world. Yeah,
and I mean, I remember they did, put up a resistant sort of stand in the first innings. They didn't lose a wicket, and then Cummins came and I think he removed Tej Narayan, and Cameron Gully took that catch, and he's made quite a reputation for himself. But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic career, I think, and 250 test wickets is, it's quite an achievement. And he will always go down as the least celebrated of those three. And incidentally, you brought up Pattinson. The last time those guys played together, I reckon it was the Headingley test where Stokes kind of stole the headlines. I think that was that test, right? Where they were like, oh, we're all going to get to play again. But I mean, he hasn't, Hazelwood, really. I mean, he wasn't taking a lot of wickets at the start of the summer. And then he unleashed that over from hell versus Pakistan in the second innings at the SCG, and he hasn't really looked back since. And I was surprised that 9 for 79 are his best figures, because I would have assumed he would have gotten a 10 for at some point. But
I mean, I don't. Was it Joel Garner? Did Joel Garner never get a 10 for? I'm trying to remember. If you poll in one of those attacks that's stacked, it is just hard to get 50% of the wickets. Like I don't think Shane Warne got a lot of 10 wicket hauls as well. Like, we've seen great bowlers not get them. I think, obviously, if you're Fazal Mahmood or Richard Hadley or Murali, you have an excess of 10 wicket hauls, but it's because no one can get any other wickets, right? So, those things do happen. It's surprising, but if you look at him, he really, and the other thing I would say for him as a 10 wicket bowler is he really is a new ball specialist. I don't mean he can't bowl after that, because he certainly can. But he is compared to Cummins and Stark, he is probably the guy who's the most one-dimensional with his usage. But that one dimension is getting out top order players from around the world. So, you take it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely works out for him. And on that note, we shall take a break. We'll be back with more cricket news. India and Afghanistan is up next, so stay with us. You're watching Uncovered with Jared and Behram, and we'll be back after this short break.
Thanks to the kind folks at Flexispot for looking after my office and my butt by sending me their E7 Pro desk that save your favorite desk heights at a touch of a button. You don't have to crank anything. This thing just finds the height that you like and you can work. And their BS12 Pro chair that supports my posterior while I'm recording, this ad and all my shows. If you need great desks, especially ones that change heights, or the best quality chairs, head on over to Flexispot today.
Welcome back to the Uncovered podcast here with Behram and Jared, and we're going to be talking about India versus Afghanistan up next. So in the last Uncovered podcast, we had basically covered the series, and then there was just one game remaining, and the third T20 international between India and Afghanistan at the Chinnaswamy Stadium, Bangalore. We basically got the greatest dead rubber of all time. Afghanistan leveled India's first innings total of 212, after which we saw two super overs in the same game in an international match for the very first time. Cries and boundary count. And also we saw lots of drama. India won at the end. And I don't think, Jared, I've ever seen Rohit Sharma this riled up in a cricket game before.
I don't think I've ever seen someone bat 3 times in a T20 game. I mean, maybe they have, and I just haven't seen it.
Controversially, because he had retired out in that first super over. I'm not sure what the laws say over here, but a lot of people were complaining when he came out to bat again in the second super over. Do you have any info on that?
No, I never looked into it. I mean, obviously I saw it happen. I wasn't watching that game, partly because it was a dead rubber. And then I was chatting to someone and I said, look, I'm so sorry. I'm sure you're watching the game and I've ruined it. And he was like, oh yeah, I haven't checked. And suddenly we both realized what the hell was happening. We went over and we saw a couple of super overs. So no, I was more watching it just for fun. I didn't look at the regulations. I was a bit shocked that you couldn't use the same bowler twice, which I didn't think made sense.
Yeah.
I would think if you can't use the same bowler twice, you can't use the same batters twice, would be the other regulation that you would have.
That makes sense.
But yeah, that seems like an error in it. But yeah, it was captivating TV. I loved it. It was like everyone go, oh, what a genius. He used the leg spinner. And I was like, well, I mean, that's not genius. I think from the first time I ever saw a super over, I think I saw a spinner ball in it. Like, it's really interesting the way that people sort of, try and assign genius to just basic things of, oh, well, they smashed our seamers. Maybe if we try someone who's not a seamer and we'll give it a go. But yeah, no, it was a fantastic game. Sadly, only 2 super overs in the end, I suppose.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to a third. And I mean, it was entertainment guaranteed. Everyone got their money's worth, whoever made the trip to the Chinnaswamy Stadium. And I mean, Rohit got pissed originally when Nabi took those buys. And I mean, he was walking, in the direction, like he didn't change his direction. The ball hit him. It was very Stokesy from the 2019 World Cup final, kind of. I'm not sure what the hiccup was over there, because, I mean, you take those runs, right?
Well, it's very interesting. There are certainly cricket cultures in the world who do not take those runs. I remember, I think Ashwin might have tweeted about it. Let's see if I can find his tweet. Ashwin because he tweeted about it. Oh, he's done a podcast as well, has he? Wait, I'm just trying to bring up the thing. He said, because I'm just trying to find out what he said, because it was really, really interesting. I can't find the tweet. Sorry.
I mean, it's all right.
But but the reason why.
You're being persistent with the tweet. I like that.
No, because I'm just
trying to find it.
I'm just trying to find his friggin' words. It's really annoying. But essentially, some people got annoyed with it, but I don't think you can get annoyed with it if you are. Oh, okay. He wrote 3 deflected byes. Interesting. And then I think he went on to say something about it later. And he obviously brought up the spirit of cricket. And what he said was, if we are the affected party on the field, we get very irritated with whatever happens. Right? I think I've got all that correct. Right? I'm trying to put articles together while we live chat. but the reason I found all that interesting is because that's the kind of the truth of it. Whereas I think Rohit got really upset. Whereas we have seen situations where weird things have happened, like when Virat Kohli got bowled by the free hit and India took the runs. And I know that's a separate situation, but again, we have seen weird situations like that before. Sometimes the ball hits you through no fault of your own. And I know plenty of players who are very experienced who will say, you don't want me to get overthrows? Don't throw the ball near me. Right? And there are many other players who have done this. I remember the Australians getting really, really angry at, I want to say, Atherton and Crawley doing it in a test match years ago, perhaps in Australia. And England were down and out, and the ball hit Atherton's bat and he ran. I think he was just thinking, we need runs by any means necessary. But yeah, the reactions are generally based on where you're from. So I like the fact that Ashwin was a little bit more cold-blooded with it, and it was like, no. But the truth is that there are some cricket cultures who are really against it, and there are some cricket cultures who are like, runs is runs, man. And it's another one of those spirits of cricket nonsense where it's like, if the ball's live, you should be able to run. And it is different sometimes if you've accidentally got in the way of the ball, and it's your fault and you've gone in the wrong direction. But if you haven't done that, I think it's up to the batter, and I've got absolutely no problem with taking runs in that situation.
Yeah, likewise. And I mean, maybe it was stemming from the fact that Rohit Sharma, he had quite a week, right? He had gotten 2 consecutive ducks in the first 2 games. A lot of the Kohli fans were writing him off, and then he scores the 69-ball 121, which was a catch-up innings, which makes it even more remarkable because India were 4 down for nothing, basically. So maybe, the fact that he had performed and he really wanted to win this, that's where those emotions were coming from. And of course, I think the Rohit fans then distributed free meals or something. So it's quite interesting what is happening on that front.
I think what him and Kohli are trying to do really is reinvent themselves as T20 cricketers to get to that next World Cup, right? And not get there, because I might get there anyway, but be a factor, right? Yeah. And it's funny. I think we said something on a podcast, and I could have misread this, but I think someone on Patreon got really, really upset with something that we said about Rohit and Virat. But the point is that they both are going to play, but in order for them to be useful, they are going to have to reinvent themselves. And at both times, Rohit fails twice and then plays an incredible innings, as you said. Sort of a catch-up innings because of where the game was. Virat looked like he was attacking massively at the top of the innings. These guys have all the weapons to be great T20 players. It was bred into them, and I don't blame the players because there's too many players like this around the world for it to be just those 2 guys. It was bred into these guys to, think about your wicket first and chip the ball around and all this sort of stuff. And the game moved on beyond them. But they still have the weapons to be able to bat that way if they want to. And, I always equate it to watching Ian Botham try and play as a pinch opener for England in the 1992 World Cup, where it was like, that clearly probably was a role he should have really, really been good at. And they were sent up there. I think he had 1 innings against Australia. He ended up with a ridiculously low strike rate and he couldn't work it out. But realistically, if Ian Botham is born 10 years later, he'd probably an opening batter in ODI cricket or a Lance Klusener type. it's hard to retrain yourself as a player late in age, but teams generally for World Cups like experience.
Yeah. I mean, both of them, like you said, have the skill set. Rohit has evolved his game. We saw that in the ODI World Cup as well. It's very admirable because, like you said, it is embedded into them from a very early age that you have to put a price on your wicket. You don't just have to go and throw it away. And they are trying to change that. And they will 100% be in India's squad. Whether or not they play each game, that's still, the jury's still out on that because you've got Jaiswal and Gill. But I still think they will because they are Rohit and Kohli and you cannot look past that. But something or another player that we definitely cannot look past anymore is Rinku Singh. He played a phenomenal hand in this game. He scored 69 not out of just 39 deliveries. He smashed Kareem Jannat for 36 runs in the final over of the innings, and that wasn't via 6 sixes. I think there was a no ball or a wide or something like that in there. But ultimately, that was the difference between both teams, right? You score 36 in the final over and then you tie the game and then you win it in the second super over. So very, very handy knock. And this is someone, Jared, who in 11 T20I innings now has 356 runs at an average of 89, striking at north of 176. So considering all of that, and, India have other players in Tilak Verma and Shivam Dubey, but I think if you look at all of them, only one of them is probably going to get to play in the World Cup, right? Not all of them. So is he a lock now for the T20 World Cup, right? Considering he has this sort of record. India do not play another T20 international till the World Cup because they're playing a test series, then they play in the IPL, then boom, T20 World Cup.
I mean, the IPL is their domestic tournament, so they can certainly use that as form. I mean, I don't know if he's a definite player or not. I think that's a fair question. What I would say about him is that when he first came in and he made runs down the order, I think we've seen occasionally Indian players come in lower pressure spots in IPL teams and make some runs, and then it kind of fades away. And what I really like is that he's gone the opposite way, where the more we see of him, the more impressive he looks at the moment. I think of the 3 players you picked, he's the one I trust the most. It's still early though. And this World Cup, maybe it will be defined by what happens in the IPL and everything else. But
he seems to me like a better Rahul Tewatia, was it? The other finisher guy from the IPL?
Well, he's a perfect example of someone who made one score. And I know he's made a couple, but it's like... I would watch him and go, what am I missing here that everyone thinks this guy is the next thing? Whereas Rinku Singh, I remember, I think it was last year, everyone kept wanting me to make a video on him. And I was like, I just want to see more. I just want to see more of him. And the more you see, you're just like, it just seems like it works to me. Now, obviously the average is ridiculous and that isn't going to stay, and even the strike rate might come down a little bit as teams start to work out where to bowl to him better and everything else. But he looks like the kind of player that India hasn't come a lot of, just a genuine player who likes that last 6 to 8 overs of an innings. And, my biggest fear is that he'll end up batting at number 4 and become an anchor. But at the moment, it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
I mean, Hardik Pandya already does that kind of, right? He does all sorts of things.
They did it to Rishabh Pant as well, man. They've done it to so many of these guys. It's like, stop it. These guys, let them be them.
I mean, absolutely. And we don't even know who the keeper for India will be in this T20 World Cup. I reckon that Rishabh Pant might be back this IPL. Then you've got KL Rahul, you've got Jitesh Sharma, who they're trusting. So it'll be an interesting lineup, but I definitely see Rinku Singh in that playing 11. I think he should be starting for India in that World Cup. Let's move a bit towards Afghanistan. Of course, Washington Sundar also did well, but we don't have enough time. We need to go forward.
No, if you start me talking about him, we'll be here for an hour. So let's not do that.
Yeah, we've got lots to talk about. And Afghanistan, of course, they played a really, really good game. Mohammad Nabi once again added an insane amount of impact in this game. He's had a great series. Fareed Ahmed with the ball took 3 for 20. And then Gurbaz Zadran and Gulbadin Naib, all of them scored 50s. The latter went pretty much like bonkers, absolutely berserk. So much so that he was dubbed as the find of the series by Deep Das Gupta. Gulbadin Naib, Jared, was the find of the series. And I just find that hilarious because just last podcast, we were talking about how he's been around forever.
The world's oldest cricketer is the find of the series. Look, good on him. As to go back to the Kavem Hodge thing from before, those are the sorts of players I respect because they have worked and worked to stay relevant, to stay in the system, to do whatever they can to make some runs, and take wickets and be handy in the field and all those sorts of things. Gulbadine is still not, he's never going to be a consistent star. But what I never doubted with him is his professionalism and his commitment to his own career. Anytime he does well, I'm happy because I think he's one of those people who I find brings joy. When he captained the 2019 World Cup, like that was a shit show. He should never have been in charge. Didn't seem to really understand leadership or anything. But he was a joyous person on and off the field during that World Cup. And I think that's something we should always remember with him.
Yeah, we'll also remember the big guns because that's his trademark celebration. Well, I suppose Afghanistan really missed Rashid in this series because had he been around, maybe the scoreline could have been different. But one final thought on India Afghanistan: that Kohli save. Did you get to see that on the boundary line?
I think I did see that. I can't remember a Kohli save.
He leaped and saved a 6, and then they captured a still of it, and everyone started making fun of how it looked like he was bowling like Bumrah. I think someone mentioned this. Alexander Cockburn mentioned this in the comments as well.
I remember a couple of years ago, I reckon it was a TV. Someone who worked in TV and cricket said to me, if you look at a lot of the catches on the boundary and you freeze them, that they look like bowlers. And I didn't see this Virat Kohli thing this week, but I hadn't thought about it since then. So, and it's probably right because there is a lot of, arms up in the air. But no, I mean, I think with Virat Kohli and probably with Steve Smith, we've almost forgotten what tremendous athletes they are and have been. Steve Smith, when he first started, was one of the best ground fielders I've ever seen. He was absolutely incredible the way he would move around. And, age wearies those athletes a little bit as well. And also, just if you have to bend over a bat for 30,000 balls, your back doesn't allow you to do magical things as often. But I think in Virat's case, and you probably throw Joe Root, who's a different kind of athlete, I think, to the other two. But again, a very interesting athlete. They have natural athletic properties, and sometimes we don't always give them the credit that we should for those sorts of skills.
Yeah, remarkable take, and really it is, an ode to his fitness, that too at this age. I've always been mad impressed by Kohli, the athlete, and this just goes on to solidify that. So anyway, congratulations to India. They don't play another T20 international, but because they play the IPL, they should be able to figure out what sort of 11 works best for them, and this ends their T20 international cycle till that World Cup. And also the segment. So Jared and I still have lots to talk about. You're watching The Uncovered with the both of us. And we'll be back after this short break to talk about New Zealand and Pakistan.
Thanks to the kind folks at Flexispot for looking after my office and my butt by sending me their E7 Pro desk that save your favorite desk heights at a touch of a button. You don't have to crank anything. This thing just finds the height that you like and you can work. And their BS12 Pro chair that supports my posterior while I'm recording, this ad and all my shows. If you need great desks, especially ones that change heights or the best quality chairs, head on over to Flexispot today.
Welcome back to the Uncovered podcast. Here with Jared and Behram, and we are going to talk about New Zealand and Pakistan, who just finished a 5-match T20 international series. The scoreline was 4-1, Jared, but Pakistan finally won a game of cricket. The last time they won was November 4th, 2023, when they quote-unquote chased down 400 versus New Zealand. And what's more astonishing is that they spun their way to victory. This was a team that was consistently conceding north of 200 in this entire series, and then they only make 134. Everyone thinks they're going to get hammered, and in classic Pakistan fashion, on brand with their heritage, they bowl New Zealand out for 92, and the spinners, Nawaz and Iftikhar, they come to the fore. They take 5 wickets combined, and only Pakistan could do that. I feel the whole consistently concede 200 plus and then defend 134. I don't think any other team is capable of that.
Also, with two of the least likely people of all time to be strike bowlers, right? Literally basically. Two kind of defensive specialists. Look, it came together and it's fine. How do you feel about the World Cup, the impending World Cup, as a Pakistani analyst?
You want to give me the whole Pakistan perspective? You wanted me to go on a rant?
No, not as a fan. But more.
No. As an analyst.
Yeah, you watching this series. I know it's slightly different wickets and everything else. Nothing seems to be fixed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So basically, they might have avoided the whitewash, and that must be like fun and games or whatever. But strategically, I thought they were consistently behind the eight ball all series. Their core players in Babar, Shaheen, Rizwan, Fakhr, they played all 5 games. Whereas youngsters like Saim Ayub and Azam Khan were dropped halfway into the series. Zaman Khan, who was, a bowler, who had a stellar year in franchise T20s last year, he wasn't played consistently. You were bowling death over specialists in the power play every single game. In one of those games, in the first 6 overs, Shaheen bowled 2, and then Zaman and Haris bowled 2 each as well. So that's 4 overs of the death in the power play. And then there's this other guy, Sahibzada Farhan. He's an opener by trade. He was the top scorer in Pakistan's domestic T20 Cup, and he was selected for the series. And he batted at 5 and then at 7, Jared. He batted at Marco Janssen's number. And it's just like baffling to me how any of this made sense, because even Azam Khan, he was batted out of position and they didn't even make use of the leg spin matchup too frequently with him. It seems like there's a resistance to change that's maybe stemming from some sort of insecurity among the senior players within the camp. And the management is out of sorts. Of course, the Professor Mohammad Hafiz, he was the director coach in this series. And Shaheen comes and says that, we experimented and I'm really happy. This was not an experiment. This was a farce in the name of an experiment. You had one set opening combination all series that Simon Rizwan will now open and Babar will be batting at first drop. You had 5 openers in the team. Get a new opening combination out every game. Learn things from this series. I don't mind them losing 5-0 as long as they're learning something. Over here, you've lost 4-1. The scoreline is still bad and you've learned nothing. The only thing we know is that one template of Babar and Rizwan getting them to pass scores and their strike bowlers kind of helping them win those games, and then the chasing bit is different altogether. But that's the only way we know Pakistan can win a game of T20. There is no plan B, C, D, E, no contingency plan whatsoever. And it's just this resistance within the camp to try different things. I feel like they're not going to learn more things about them. And what they're doing is they're ruining the games of these unabashed hitters in Azam Khan and Saim Ayub, and Mohammad Haris wasn't even a part of the series, right? So it's really weird. I don't understand what the strategy and thinking and game plan is. I get that there's instability at the top. We have a new chairman now, and this guy is another political person. Everyone's losing their shit. Who knows, the PCB might even get suspended like the SLC. You never know. But it's all like absolute shambles, and I feel like they still have 11 to 12 T20s leading into the T20 World Cup, and they're still not going to do any of that stuff that we want them to do. They're going to go with these fixed templates and just not going to learn all the different possibilities that they have at their disposal, because they've got the resources. That's the part that pisses me off. They've got the resources. They fail to utilize them, and they don't think left field or out of the box at all. It's really worrying.
I think what they need is more former players involved. Clearly, Mickey was holding them back.
I mean, that Mickey was still on that contract, but he was in the NCA, not with the team in Australia and New Zealand. Now he's resigned, but they were paying his wages and they weren't utilizing him either. So it's just bizarre.
Yeah. Look, it's something has gone very wrong there. We all know that Pakistan still has the talent to turn up to a World Cup and do something quite special, but there's something messy. They need to get rid of Hafiz.
He's probably on his way out now that the leadership up top has changed.
Yeah, well, that's the other problem, isn't it? So that's why all these things happen, is because the leadership up top. That's not how these things should go. You find professionals, you make sure that they're right for the job, you back them, you give them all the resources that's possible, and then you can judge them on what happens next. You can't judge Hafiz on any of this. It was crazy before he took the job, right? And look, that's also his fault because he gave himself this job. But
pretty much,
it's 2 series. Anyway, it's just a mess as usual.
I mean, the opening combination in particular, everyone makes this entire mainstream thing about Babar and Rizwan. I get it. You want to try out different opening combinations. You've got players with that skill set who could be very effective in the power play. And if you've got slow turning conditions in the West Indies, maybe you want to capitalize on that power play, right? Because the game's only going to get slower as it progresses. But, what's with this rigidity? Why are all of these guys playing all these games? We know what Babar and Rizwan and Shaheen and Fakhr and Iftikhar and all of these guys can do. Why are you not blooding your youngsters? And that's the part I don't get. That's the rigidity that literally, it falls on deaf ears when it comes to me. But anyway.
Well, I would go, it's one way or the other. If you're coming to the World Cup, all the youngsters are fine. You probably don't want 3 or 4 youngsters in the side. You want to make sure that your fast bowler, who's your captain, is actually doing his job. You want to make sure you know what your spinners are doing and that you have a clear separation of Bubba and Rizwan, and they both know exactly what they are supposed to be doing from here on in.
Yeah.
And then you play the same side for all the games, but that is the thought process you go in with, and you are very clear. They've kind of done nothing, right? They've kind of got... Anyway, it's not good.
I mean, role clarity has never been their strong suit. Whenever they do get that right, they win things. So, I mean... That's that. Let's go to New Zealand now. The last time we spoke on Uncovered, Finn Allen had scored a quick-fire 34 and an impressive 70-odd and 40-something deliveries. Well, Jared, in the third game in Dunedin, he scored a 62-ball 137. And in that process, he smashed 16 sixes, which is a new world record. He's tied with Hazratullah Zazai, who got those in Dehradun versus Ireland. I can guarantee you that at least half of those sixes resulted in a ball change. So, I mean, Pakistan probably ended up bowling with like 9-10 balls in this game. And, you know, he's ended up as the leading run scorer of the series with 275 runs at a strike rate of 195. That is the telling part. That is probably the reason the scoreline reads 4-1, because no one in Pakistan could do that. And this is immense for New Zealand because they've kept the faith in this guy. And you mentioned that, of course, they have to keep the faith in certain kinds of players because they're not blessed with a lot of talent. But look at how well they've groomed him. And now all of a sudden, he looks primed for this T20 World Cup.
Yeah, I still want to see him against the best attacks, on wickets that are a little bit more helpful. But if he can do this on flat pitches against anyone outside the 2 or 3 best teams, he could probably win them a couple of games in the normal part of a World Cup just by being Finn Allen. And that's the transformative ability. If he's really going to be the player that I think, well, certainly IPL owners and people were thinking early on, he needs to be able to do this consistently against everyone. But this could be the series, right? Like Chapman didn't average -7 in this series. Glenn Phillips was fine.
He had one innings, and that innings also was like they were chasing 160 odd, and he was going slow, but then he cashed in. So good for him.
Yeah. So Glenn Phillips hasn't quite stood up. They need one. I keep saying it. I think they need one of those 3 guys to get to that next level, right, and become that player. And I still got my doubts about Finn Allen, all things considered. But on a ball striking ability, he's probably... I probably have him on that Alex Hales level of if he just swings through the line, I kind of just expect the ball to disappear. He's not overhitting it. You know, he should just be able to almost chip sixes. The way that he bats, you know, not muscular, not a sort of Andrew Simons or Jason Roy type, but that sort of player who can just, as long as he keeps his eye on the ball and his weaknesses don't get exposed too much, he can make real problems for people.
I mean, it was the highest ever score by any New Zealand cricketer, male and female, I believe, in a T20 international. And what I like about him, because I follow those innings very closely, right? I was up all night watching this massacre. And if you pitch it up to him, that's his slot. He goes for it. Even when they dragged it back, he was really strong on the pull shot. And versus Nawaz, he did get stuck initially, right, on the back foot. But then he started to leave his crease and hit sixes versus him as well. So I'm keen to see how he'll fare in the Caribbean, right? Because New Zealand, if I'm not wrong, they play the bulk of their games in the Caribbean. So that's going to be the real test.
No, for sure.
Anyway, some final thoughts. Of course, Tim Southee, the leading wicket taker of the series and the leading wicket taker in T20 internationals. He used his slower ones to perfection, ended up with 10 scalps for the series. Daryl Mitchell also really had a good one. Some very useful 50s in there. We mentioned Glenn Phillips having that score, Finn Allen doing well. Chapman is there and thereabouts. Kane will be back inevitably. So when I look at New Zealand as like a side, I feel like they've, checked a lot of boxes here in the build-up to the T20 World Cup, because we mentioned prior how they're always like perennial dark horses. And they'll make the knockout stages, but they'll not go one step deeper. They'll lose the semi or the final. I feel like they've got a really, really competent side over here and a good blend of youth and experience. And I feel like it's working for them really well. And I would, ink them in as an outside contender, not like between dark horses and actual contenders for this World Cup.
Yeah. Do they have an all-rounder?
They have Santner, and those conditions will help him.
Yeah, so not really an all-rounder. I mean, fine with the bat, but not going to give them all that much. Nisham,
I don't see Nisham playing this World Cup.
So that's their biggest issue. I think they have their more anchory players in Conway, Williamson, and Mitchell. And Mitchell obviously can play catch up, but usually does, traditionally at least, start a little bit slower. So I think they need Phillips or who were we just talking about? Finn Allen.
We talked about Finn Allen.
I think they need one of them to match up with the other guys, and then I think Bolt and Southey are maybe in career best form in white ball cricket.
Pretty much.
When it comes to slow balls and all that sort of stuff.
Bolt's knuckleball might be really useful in those conditions.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, I would assume it's going to be really handy. A lot probably still depends on Milne/Ferguson. Well, I mean, if Ferguson is the old Ferguson, then they're a legitimate semi-final finalist chance. And if not, maybe a lot of things have to go right for them. They generally don't outbat teams at major tournaments. That's maybe they've done it a couple of times, but it's the bowlers that keep them in everything. So if Ferguson is Ferguson and the other two are in career best form, maybe it's a good time for them all to be coming together at the right stage. But there's a few weaknesses, I think, within that side.
Well, what I'll say is that prior to the series, I believe that both New Zealand and Pakistan, they play a very similar mold of T20 cricket. And in this series, we saw New Zealand kind of change that narrative. Let's see if that persists. Let's see if they can carry that.
We quite often see New Zealand do that at home because they play on small wickets and they like to hit through the line. And generally when they play away from home, especially in World Cups, they go back to that more Pakistani method that you're talking about, which is kind of the batters making par and the bowlers making par look good.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, before we end Uncovered Part 1, there is a Sri Lanka versus Zimbabwe series. The T20 series just ended, and Jared, Zimbabwe finally won a game. They defeated Sri Lanka in the second T20 International by 4 wickets. Matthews and Hasaranga, they both scored 60s, but they went in vain because Craig Irvine, he scored a very useful 70. And then Luke Jongwe and Clive Mandande, they had these whirlwind cameos at the end that took the chevrons home, and it was a victory long time in the making, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think Luke Jongwe is a fascinating cricketer because you look at his overall record, and it is kind of at times sort of hard to see. Like, he's a below average bowler and he's never made any runs as an all-rounder. But
and also, one more thing that you might not know is that back in the day when he was young, Angelo Matthews used to be his display picture on Facebook.
I did not know. I don't know as much about his Facebook account as I should.
He spoke about it, how Matthews was someone he idolized growing up.
Oh, that is interesting. But what I think he's an all-rounder. Obviously, he has a bit of talent with bat and ball, and he's reaching his peak age, right? So I think he's around 27, 28. It'll be interesting to see. I have said for a while that I don't know how he fits into that side. I know when I mentioned that, some people from Zimbabwe sort of reached out from, around the camp to say, no, trust us. He's going to come good. They need him to come good. And, if they have him, Sikandar Raza and Ryan Pearl, there's 3 guys with all-round talent that you can kind of build a side around. That might be that sort of Netherlands/New Zealand side where you don't have anyone in the top and your middle order does all the work, and then you've got like 83 bowling options. Maybe it's that kind of team. But again, we talked about Zimbabwe maybe last week or the week before. They're disappointing because you look at their side and they should win more than they do, and they seem to get a win almost all the time, but they never string enough together to actually make an impact anywhere. And I just hope that this is the start of something big for Zimbabwe, rather than the end of a golden generation. Because if it's the end of a golden generation, they're going to slip back so far because so many of these, Namibia and Papua New Guinea and Nepal, and there's so many teams ready to jump up to that next level.
Yeah, and I mean, if for anyone who watched the previous episode of Uncovered, we went through how their batters, Craig Irvine, Sean Williams, Sikandar Raza Butt, people who they rely on with the bat, they are on the wrong side of 30, and Zimbabwe
They're on the
might
wrong
be
side of 36, aren't they?
Yeah, basically. And Zimbabwe might be in one of those really terrible situations where they don't have the batting to back up what looks like a really good pace attack. And Zaipa Cost over here has just told us the Zimbabwe women have also brought an end to an 11-match losing streak dating back to 20.
I saw that as well.
2021 in ODI. So that's
2011. Great. That would be maybe they weren't playing. No, I saw that as well. Look, I just want Zimbabwe cricket to work, so maybe I think about it from the wrong way. But I do see talent there, and so I am thinking that there is something to build from, even if we do get a spate of retirements.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, that streak was brought to an end by a tie. They didn't win that game in Harare. So
they got half a win. Well, they didn't lose. They broke the losing streak. They just didn't break the streak without wins.
As did the men's team, but they broke it with a win. And I really hope to see some more positive results from them because it's a team that I really enjoy following. And I feel there's a lot of talent there that should be producing more results. But anyway, they may have leveled the series, but Captain Wanindu Hasaranga, he spun his team to a 2-1 victory in the final game. He returned figures of 4 for 15, and he's hit form. And he'll certainly enjoy those conditions in the Caribbean, Jared, because come World Cup, if he fires, Sri Lanka look all the more dangerous.
It's just a fantastic player. I think I had him quite high up on my spinners list when we did Crick Picks. He's got this weird low arm action, right? And he can spin it both ways. People don't pick him very well. Obviously, we're still hoping one day he'll hit the ball quite hard as well. But I think he's... actually, I didn't have him on my spinners list. It was on the all-rounders list, wasn't it?
Yeah, all-rounders list. He was your second pick, I think.
Yeah. Look, I think he's fantastic. And from the first time I saw him, I thought he was going to be a star. And that might have even been LPL I saw him in.
I'll tell you when I saw him first. Sri Lanka's C team back then, and a lot of those guys went on to become the A team. They were touring Pakistan, and Pakistan had recalled Umar Akmal and Ahmed Shahzad and those guys to the team. And Sarfaraz was captaining in his last series, and they defeated Pakistan 3-0 in their own backyard. And Wanindu Hasaranga was the guy who was just, basically making them look like absolute novices. And no one could pick that googly up. Still, people struggle, and Pakistani batters in particular struggle big time to pick that googly up. You mentioned that versus teams that are, not at that sort of level in international cricket, they look absolutely clueless versus Hasaranga. And now he's captain, and he's had a stellar LPL. So there's a lot to, be encouraged with over here.
No, I think, look, I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. And I think he can be a better cricketer than we've even seen so far, and he's been fantastic. But when he plays people just below that top level, and I've talked to some of the associate cricketers faced him, they're just like, what the hell is this? Right? And I'll be honest, the last bowler they told me that about was Rashid Khan. Now, I don't think he's quite at Rashid Khan's level, but, the parallels are there. Having, he's had some success in the IPL as well. Overseas spinners in the IPL. There's a lot to like about him as a player. The leadership stuff I don't know as much about, so I don't want to massively get involved. But so far in the IPL, he's got a bowling average of 21. A little bit expensive, still goes at over 8 runs and over, but he can be a little bit like that. But certainly just an incredible talent. At, I don't know, how old would he be?
Probably late 20s, I'd say.
Yeah, maybe mid to late 20s now, 25, 26 maybe.
Probably. That series I'm talking about was a while back.
Yeah. But look, I think he's... I think I've told this story before, but it's funny because you get heaps of things wrong in this job. But I remember seeing him in whichever game it was randomly, and I'd never seen him before. And I messaged the person I thought might be his agent. I said, "Are you his agent?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am." I said, "He's going to make $1 million." And he's probably already made more than that, right? And it's early on in his career. Like, you could just tell that he was a next level talent. And it's, fantastic.
Definitely the best talent I've seen come out of Sri Lanka in a long time. And there have been some exciting players, but he's just a cut above. And I mean,
him and Dhananjay De Silva, DDS.
I mean, Teek is also there, so I'm looking forward to watching that spin duo do their thing in this T20 World Cup.
Spin triumvirate. You forgot DDS again, but that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's also the Willalage kid, right? I hope I've got the pronunciation right, but maybe he's in the mix as well. Anyway, that brings an end to Uncovered Part 1. For those of you in the comments section, thank you for your interactions. And to all audio listeners, we'll just let everyone know that we're splitting Uncovered, as Jared mentioned, into cricket news, the cricket performances part and then the cricket news part. This is the end of the cricket performances part. So everyone who's still with us on YouTube, you can stay on because we're going to carry this same show and we're going to have Uncovered Part 2. But that's it for Part 1. So yeah, we'll see you shortly after this break. And for those of you who are not going to be with us in the audio, thank you and goodbye.
This is just one of our YouTube channels. We also have another one that covers the greatest stories in our sport called Good Areas. Why do India keep losing World Cups? How did Stuart Broad become a meme king? And the long sordid history of South Africa chasing. Head over to Good Areas a couple of times a week for the best stories in cricket. A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be, and from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster, making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link.
Hello and welcome to Uncovered Part 2. I'm Behram Kazi, who you can find at Def Mango on Twitter, and with me is Jared Kimber, you can find absolutely everywhere. Lots of fun stuff to talk about with respect to current affairs in cricket and the news that's circulating. And what better place to start, Jared, than the beautiful exchange between KP and AB de Villiers that we saw on Twitter. This was not originally on the itinerary. I literally put it in last minute because how can we not talk about Kevin Peterson initially saying that, after 100 meters, a 6 should be 12. And then AB de Villiers chiming in and saying, yeah, I agree, but 12 is too much. So let's go with 9 because it's an upside down 6. And it might just be the best thing I've read on Twitter in a while.
It's hurt my head. This is the World Cricket Committee, the MCC World Cricket Committee coming up. When people... Let me tell you a story, actually, because it's unfair to pick on AB and KP, even though they're obviously ludicrous suggestions, which we can go through step by step in a moment. The World Cricket Committee a few years ago, Steve Waugh decided that to find match fixes, what we needed was lie detector tests, right? Now, I don't know how much you know about lie detector tests. I happen to know a little bit about them. And so I was at the press conference going, but don't lie detectors have false positives? Right? The other thing is that there are many people, there's a reason why we don't actually use lie detector tests to decide if someone is guilty or not, Behram. It's because they're not accurate, right? And so Steve Waugh and his lie detector friend wanted players to opt into a system, right, where they would get lie detector tests, would take lie detector tests on whether they had done fixing or not. This is what happens at these meetings. Absolute ludicrous nonsense is spoken by people who don't. And I'm just not having a go at Steve Waugh here. Steve Waugh doesn't. It's not. I'm not expecting him to be an expert on lie detector machines, right? What I am expecting though is that it shouldn't just be former players in the room, because a lot of them get their news from Facebook, right? And a lot of them don't read news at all, and a lot of them are not. They don't understand science. They don't understand, outcomes and all these sorts of things. So let's get to KP. Let's take it step by step. KP wants us to give 12 runs to a ball that's hit over 100 meters, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are we sure that measuring systems are accurate, Bayram?
I am not for this suggestion, but the only way you would make it work is have a visible ring in the crowd. That's the only way.
Which again, what about if the ball hits the higher up tiers?
And it doesn't get to that point.
What if it hits something on the way there? Also, I would assume the only way to, and I'm not having a go.
What if a fan from the opposition team catches it right before it crosses that ring?
Is it where it lands, or is it where it was supposed to land? Right. My guess is, so to get a really accurate Hawkeye measurement, we have to have a very still camera without a chip in the ball. I don't even know how this is feasible. So let's start there. Right. I do not know how this is even feasible. So at the moment, I don't know if you want to do it in the future for some celebrity competition that, or for some random competition, that's fine. It would be a gimmick though. We have to be, this isn't like, in basketball, sometimes they talk about having, a 4-point shot. And I know in football, occasionally people talk about, kicking 2 goals if you're further out and all those sorts of things. Absolutely fine. But you have to know that at a certain point, these things are gimmicks. But to be fair, boundaries were gimmicks. And 3-pointers were gimmicks as well. Sometimes gimmicks end up being great things. I just don't see how this improves the game in any way, shape, or form. But if you go back to Martin Crowe, when he was coming out with Cricket Max before T20, he had things like this. So I understand it. So I don't know how you measure it, so it's a pointless thing at the moment. What an AB's is, it should be a 9 because that's a 6 upside down.
Yep.
I don't know how to deal with that as logic. That's like saying it shouldn't be a sandwich, it should be a burrito. I mean, yes, okay.
It's, if you thought that 9 being an upside down 6 is bizarre, wait till you hear AB's other suggestion, which is that the 3 commentators who are commenting on the game as is, they should be acting as the third umpires, not the third umpire who is qualified and has worked his way up to become an elite panel umpire in the ICC. They should then decide the result of a decision that goes upstairs. So there's so many issues with this. First of all, they're not umpires. Secondly, there's the whole home bias thing. If you're playing in Australia and there's one commentator from the other country, what to do then? And then this is what I tweeted. Think of this. We're in the future, and this has been incorporated. AB's suggestion is now part of the law book. There's been a Munkad. It's gone upstairs, and Ravi Ashwin, Stuart Broad, and Liton Das are commenting. What about that then?
It's just, it's beyond ludicrous. And also, and I have a lot of respect for AB de Villiers. Obviously, we shared a producer for a long time. And as a cricketer, and as a person, I don't know him personally, but I've got a lot of friends in common. Everyone tells me he's great. This is one of the stupidest things anyone has ever said. It is patently disrespectful to umpires, because I can tell you, as someone who has commentated for years, most commentators do not know any of the laws, let alone the right ones at the right time. Then the idea that you're going to do it by committee, right, is like, well, it's going to take forever, and there's going to be, I just can't see how that is going to add to anything again. So I don't think most commentators know the laws thoroughly enough to adjudicate. And if you watch, anytime there is a moment in cricket, how many times do commentators get it wrong? And I'm one of them. As I said, I am a professional commentator. It has happened to me. It is not my job to know about the implementation of the laws. I'm not spending all my time keeping up with the laws and thinking of all the different situations that might happen, because I am a commentator and I am doing other jobs. Right?
Imagine the umpires going up to the commentators. That would be just hilarious. And I just want to give a shout out to Cameron Ponsonby. I think he had the best tweet on this, and he basically, do you know about Joey Barton? You probably heard of him, right?
Sadly, I do. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So basically, Joey Barton,
one of those people who read a couple of books that people thought was smart, and it turns out he's just an absolute idiot.
I mean, I saw that absolute idiot thing coming from a mile, even in his playing days. He was one of those really aggressive sort of weird characters. But he said a lot of, he has one garbage take after another. One of his garbage takes was basically that you need to have played the professional sport to be able to comment on it. And basically, that's what the first part of Cameron Ponsonby's tweet was, that's what Joey Barton says. And then he says, AB de Villiers, 9 is an upside down 6, and Pommy Mbangwa should be the third umpire. So It was
Well,
hilarious.
let's go back to the Joe Barton thing because I haven't really had a chance to speak on it. I've been told this before by a former cricketer who said the exact same thing to me about why women shouldn't commentate in cricket. I know professional male athletes believe this. And I looked this guy in the eye and I said, should I be able to do it? And he went, yeah. I went, but I haven't played professional cricket at any level.
Yeah.
So does my penis give me some special power that allows me to commentate when a woman who is professional, who's worked her ass off, got to the levels, a better cricketer than me, probably forgetting gender, just a better cricketer than me, she can't commentate, but I can? So that's where their fallacy always comes down. Look, I don't know what to do with the AB to Villiers one. As I said, I do think it's disrespectful to umpires. I think you just get a lot of shit umpiring decisions, right? Again, if you look at it from the KP AB de Villiers side of things, these are two guys who are entertainers and they are looking for entertainment. Would it be entertaining? True. Probably. Would it be good for the sport? No. If I was a professional, right, and I wasn't AB or KP and I was a lower down professional and I'm playing in my fourth game and I failed in my first three and I've done something and the three idiot commentators, maybe I'm one of them, is in the booth and we get the decision wrong and they get dropped and they never play again, mate. If an umpire gets a decision wrong and an umpire is professionally trained and done everything they can to be the best, in their class and do something, you shake your shoulders and you walk off and you do what you do. If it's some commentator who is, as you said, biased, as you said, just doesn't like the law, right? So they're deciding not to implement it. Some of the stuff I've heard from commentators, I'm like, I'm not sure they should be allowed to choose what they want for lunch, let alone make a decision on a cricket field. And again, there has to be a demarcation at a certain point between entertainment and cricket. I think we should always factor in entertainment. And as I was saying before, there are parts of cricket that exist partly for entertainment that have made the sport better, right? So I'm okay with those sorts of things, but not if you're making it worse for no reason as well.
Yeah, I mean, imagine...
And a 6 and an upside down 9. I don't think you... how do you follow that anyway, right?
Yeah, it's really bizarre. And also, I mean, imagine soft signal going to the commentator's box, right? That would be another nightmare. But anyway, time for some serious talk. Of course, we've got other things on the itinerary. And in some unfortunate news, both Harry, Brook and Virat Kohli have withdrawn from parts of the upcoming India versus England 5-match test series. Brook, I believe, is out indefinitely. He's cited family or personal reasons, and as is Virat Kohli, but he's only out of the first 2 tests. Jared, it definitely diminishes the quality of the series because those are, well, Virat Kohli, you could argue, is the best that the game has seen, or one of the best that the game has ever seen. And Harry Brook was amongst those 3 to 4 young batters who was looked upon as, the next generation of elite batters. And he'd had a fantastic start to his test career as well. We're all super stoked to see whether or not Bazball works on India's ranked turners, which we can definitely expect to see. How disappointed are you that these guys will miss out on some games?
I mean, the truth is that I think we need to get to a point where we just consider this no different than an injury. Whether it be a mental health injury, a physical health injury. It took us a long time to, I think, get to the point where we started to think of those as injuries as well. And, we want work-life balance. I think I was brought up to think that Test cricket was war and that you had to put that before everything else. And I think we now all understand that that's kind of nonsense. And realistically, your family comes before your badge. And if it doesn't, 100%. I think you probably have the wrong priorities if we're being completely honest. So I do think that from that point of view, it's fine and just another, they're missing the test. I think it's disappointing from a Harry Brook's point of view, from a Harry point of view, just because I think he still has questions about how he plays spin. And he also was maybe the most talented young England player that was going to be going over there, and so he's the most exciting one. Plus, he's just exciting to watch. Virat Kohli, Virat Kohli's missed tests before, and that's fine. It's just a little bit more awkward because of where Harry Brook's career is. I hope in both cases they get all the support and things get better for them and they can come back and play as soon as possible. But yeah, more from a, this is a cricket podcast. I don't, know exactly what the reasons for the personal issues are. And sometimes I find this out. Sometimes I don't find it out. And I don't find it out because it doesn't help me all that. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't change my decision. But I think just from a cricket perspective, it's a little bit unfortunate that Harry Brook's not going to be playing.
Oh, 100%. Particularly, I was really looking forward to watching him bat in India because that would tell us a lot about Harry Brook and where he's at as a young developing cricketer. And Kohli, as you mentioned, this is not the first time he's put family first. He took those test matches off in Australia as well. And hopefully everything is well on both fronts. I hope that Harry can return and play a couple of tests in this series. I don't know what the exact news is over there, but I would love to see that. But what's disappointed me, Jared, is that we've seen a lot of hate comments, and that's not cool.
Have we? I mean, I haven't really been on Twitter. So hate to Virat.
More so towards Harry, actually.
Well, hate from who though? Like what sort of fans?
Well, all sorts of fans, but if I say something now, it might put my position in jeopardy, and I start getting that hate.
Oh, okay, I get where you're going there. When Virat does it, it's not. I mean, as I said,
go to out of context cricket, and there's actually this screenshot of both of those instances. Same account says, "Oh, you've chosen your personal commitments over your country," and then on the other one, it's like, "All right, Virat bhai, we understand."
Out of context cricket. That's actually a really good Twitter account.
Yeah.
I don't know if I follow them, but they do some some good stuff. There
are a bunch of out of context crickets now. Actually, I don't even know which one's the authentic one, but there is one really good one out of all of them.
Okay. Look, yeah. Personal reasons over country shame. We understand King Kohli. Yeah, okay. That is pretty funny, actually. I mean, how do you ever tweet again when you get like caught doing stuff? I have no idea. I don't understand how people like Boris Johnson and most of our politicians now, Boris Johnson, Trump, Modi, how they go on because they get caught in such blatant lies and they just never look behind them, I suppose. That's yesterday's news and I'm on to my new scandal. But it's the same with Twitter. Like I'd be injured for a week if that happened to me. As I said, I think we should be accepting of these things. I don't think it's ever affected my work, but my wife and I have been through miscarriages before, and I think it was when I was at Cricketfo, and I told Samba, and Samba just said, "Get better, look after your wife and get better." And I'm not saying either of these guys go through miscarriages. I don't know, as I said before, but we have to go through these things, and your kids get, when I was working for Scotland, might be the most dramatic one. I don't know if I've ever told this story before, actually. So I was working for Scotland, and my whole family was in Dubai with us during that World Cup, and it was just the boys. It was before I had Clementine, and I was at the game, and suddenly the social media manager from Scotland came up, and it was quite young at the time. And she just had this ashen look on her face. And I could tell something was going on, but I'm analyzing the game. So I'm logging things in the computer system and, doing all the things that I'm normally doing. And I could tell something was going on, but I had no idea what was to do with me. And then suddenly she came over and she said, "Your son's just been taken to hospital." Oh. Right? And Cricket Scotland, Simon Smith, who no longer works for Cricket Scotland, but he was a very important person at Cricket Scotland at the time. He basically just kind of slid my laptop over and said, "Go to the hospital." Right now, it wasn't that important a game, but it was an important game to us eventually qualifying for the World Cup. But there was no thought process that I was going to continue to work at that stage. It turned out my son was absolutely fine. It took me a long time to find the hospital. Then you like this, they wouldn't let me into the hospital because I said I'm here to see my son, and the guy's like, no children have come in, and I was like, Are you sure? My wife's literally dropped a pin on the map because we were having so much trouble. Me and the liaison officer trying to find this random hospital in Dubai. The guy's like, no. And it turned out that because my wife is not white, he was thinking in his mind, no white children have come in.
Classic.
Yeah. And so, but not everyone at Cricket Scotland completely backed me. And of course they would. They're human beings. Yeah. Right?
Of course.
And if you are tweeting what that person has tweeted on Out of Context Cricket, you have to actually start to think about what your priorities are in life. Like, something has happened in Harry Brook's life. And I remember when, and I'm pretty sure I've got all this story right, but when Ben Stokes pulled out of, oh God, what cricket did he pull out of?
A lot of cricket, all of cricket.
But there was one when he went, when I think his father was passing away. And I can't remember what the series was he pulled out of. And me and George Dobell, I don't know how we both got tagged in this, but this guy kept tagging us going, this guy doesn't want to play for his country. And he's actually, he'll be back in time for the IPL and all this sort of stuff. And we don't know how to, we knew what the story was, right? But we don't want to be there on Twitter going, mate, this is legit. His father is about to pass away. I think that was the story anyway. it was a few years ago now. I can't remember. But people are so angry about everything. Right? Yeah. On social media. And they just jump to these wild conclusions. But it doesn't matter. It could be as simple as a player's pet has died. Right? And that has affected them so emotionally that they need a break. And that might seem silly to many people. That's fine. But it doesn't to the person who it's affected. Right?
Absolutely.
And we had a situation in the last week in the NBA where a young coach of Golden State Warriors passed away. And the Golden State Warriors didn't play their next 2 matches. They were too upset to go out and play. But the player that this guy had coached back in Serbia is Nikola Jokic, and he continued to play. It affects all people differently, right?
True.
The night my nan died, who was almost my best friend when I was a teenager at times, like I was so close to her, just a brilliant old sweary woman that she was, right? The night she died, I had a basketball game scheduled. I still went and played because that was my way of working through it. And some people do the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
And how we deal with grief, with pressure, with family issues, it's got to be independent of each individual person. And to have a go at someone when you don't know the full details, it's like, guys, let's just chill out. And I do say guys because it generally tends to be guys.
Yeah, I mean, that is the vast majority of these instances. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add to whatever you said is that regardless of what the situation may be, you mentioned the passing away of a pet. It could be a mental health break. It could be a birth of a child. It could be an ailing relative, whatever it may be. These are healthy moves. It probably ends up being better for the player in the long run. And we hope that everything's fine on that end. Anyway, let's take a quick break. We'll be back with some Bangladesh Premier League news. You're watching Uncovered Part 2 with Behram and Jared, and we'll be back shortly.
So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today.
Welcome back to Uncovered Part 2, the current affairs bit. And we have some Bangladesh Premier League news to share. Of course, Jared, he basically made me add this one. The BPL is having some ownership drama. We've seen that it was a 7-team competition, then became a 6-team competition. Now I think it's back to being a 7-team competition. And the Comilla Victorians, they will basically stick around in the BPL till the 2025 season. After that, they're done. Some franchises have new owners altogether.
Did they change their mind, though? Did they not change their mind recently and say that they were going to stick around for long? I mean, you might be right.
It is.
It's developed so quickly. Who knows? By the time this comes out, they could decide that they are a 6 and not a 9.
Yeah. But also, there's other stuff that's happening, right? A lot of these franchises have new owners. And weirdly enough, there's been an owner switch in some of these franchises that owning one franchise one season and another one the next. And yeah, I'm not too sure what's going on over here, so educate me.
So essentially, and I've done a podcast about all the T20 leagues coming up very, very soon on Red Inca. So it's quite an interesting topic. But essentially what has happened here is you had a situation where they went private ownership. And the private owners invested quite a lot of money, and the BPL became an important league for a little while. The West Indian players were there. I think AB de Villiers played in it at one stage. And I had this all. And then there was an argument between, I think it was about Shakib wanting to change teams, if I remember correctly. And they basically kicked out the owners and went back to a cricket board run league, right? But then some owners stuck around and some owners didn't. And so part of the issue now is the fact that there isn't a money sharing model for the ownership group. But what they have done is that this is a classic case of that league is now completely irrelevant, right? I'm only talking about this because of what a mess it is. It is outside of maybe the New Zealand League, and I would say the New Zealand League at least is trying to be a domestic league with a couple of low-level international players, whereas the BPL probably still has some visions of being bigger than that. But it really shows you how important management is, how important the decisions you make are. If they'd always wanted it to be a league without external finances and everything else, absolutely fine. But they've just kind of made all the mistakes you can make in that one particular league. And so what they have is like a half Premier League and a half non-Premier League all together. And, you know, it's a real shame because I think the way that the old BPL was going, I thought at the very least there was a chance of getting really good, high-quality players coming through, some good coaches. You know, I was offered a couple of jobs there in the BPL. Like, it's feeling like a league that was really moving forward. And I think it's a time when Bangladesh just needs that. It needs, you know, good coaches coming in, top international players and everything else. But every time the BPL seems to be in the news, it's because the cricket board has done something stupid with it, or the other one is the another cricket board, of course, at the moment with their no-objection certificates, which I'm sure you're going to tell me about.
Yeah, so you mentioned quality players, you know, not being available for the BPL anymore. Well, a lot of Pakistan players did go and play that league. Of course, Pakistan players don't get the SA20 gigs and the IPL gigs for reasons that are not their fault, but Bangladesh Premier League has been one of those havens where they've really gone and honed their skills and entertained masses. Well, Pakistan has this new stipulation that centrally contracted players will only be allowed to feature in 2 franchise T20 leagues apart from the PSL starting July. So weird calendar year over there, right? And basically, they've denied Fakhr and they've denied Zaman Khan. And more importantly, they've denied Mohammad Haris, who's not playing domestic. He's not playing the President's Trophy. He was warming Pakistan's bench for the longest time, not playing any cricket. Then he was dropped, saying that he was rested from warming the bench, I suppose. And now he basically made his way to Dhaka. He was there. He was training with the, you know, BPL side that he was with. And then he was basically denied that no objection certificate, saying that this would be his 3rd league, so he can't play. Whereas if you look at the likes of Haris Rauf, in this period, he's played the Major League tournament. He's played the 100 and the Big Bash League. You've got the likes of Azam and Shadab Khan, who are set to play the ILT20, which will be their 3rd league. So there's a disparity over here. I'm not sure what the reason is, but it's poor for both Pakistan cricketers who want to earn a franchise paycheck and for the BPL.
Yeah, I think there's a huge restraint of trade lawsuit that can come from this as well. You're going to be shocked here, but I'm not an expert on Pakistani law. But I just don't really see how this is allowed to continue the way that it is. And I know other boards have talked about it as well, and they've been worried about getting stung with restraint of trade as well. That's my major issue with it. I don't think it's acceptable. But the boards are trying to keep some power as it's slipping out of their fingers. I'm not sure I would want to damage my relationship with a young talented player like Mohammad Haris for something that probably doesn't matter all that much in the long term. And if they're not enforcing this rule for other people, they're also going to look like bigger idiots as well. So, you know, from my perspective, it looks kind of stupid all the way around. In some ways, I would say it's like a 6, but turned upside down.
I mean, what's more ridiculous over here is that, you know, if he was playing the President's Trophy, he was playing red ball cricket, I'd still understand. You're prioritizing your domestic competition. You want your premier players to play it. He's not. You know, he's not playing any cricket. He hasn't played any cricket since a while now. Why are you restricting him where he could go and earn a paycheck and up his skills potentially in a T20 World Cup year where you've clearly... I don't even know what your plans are with respect to Mohammad Haris. This is the thing with Pakistan and young players. They make it difficult for them. And unfortunately for Mohammad Haris, he's the sort that he'll put stuff up on Instagram, right? He'll make that emoji with a zipper on it. So I fear for him. And this is Pakistan cricket. Your mind always goes to a potential vendetta that might be at play over here. Like, why is he being dealt the way he's being dealt with? And, you know, I'm not sure if they had a conversation with him prior to him leaving for Bangladesh, but this is just a poor look going forward. And it's not like you're paying your players the best sort of money in the world. You're not even offering them the best kind of medical care because your rehab process is shit. There is no players union. I could go on and on about this, right? Like,
the union is the important thing. The union is
no
really
trust.
important, right?
Absolutely no trust. Players are insecure, right?
You've got to. I just don't think in modern cricket, and it's going to get worse with ownership groups coming in, that I think it's the 4 major teams, which is Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and India. And I understand their union culture isn't as big in subcontinent as it is in other places. I'm sorry, you just have to unionize. You guys are just going to get screwed over. IPL players are underpaid, considering how much the IPL makes. They are not making as much money as they should be. There's so many people who are getting ripped off in so many ways. The cricket union can only be so powerful, and without all the boards being involved, all the player bodies being involved. Unionize is what I would be saying. Especially as the future of cricket, it becomes more and more confusing because of the ownership and the boards. But boards don't treat people fairly, right? They just don't, and you have to force them to.
Pakistan players earn 3% of the revenue, so they are criminally underpaid, and you're putting stipulations on them. They don't already play the IPL. Cricketers have a shelf life. You don't protect them. There is no transparent communication. There's always someone new up top. It's an absolute shit show. I think Arco has said the exact same thing over here, and it's really frustrating because you don't want your talent to go rogue. If tomorrow Mohammad Haris decides that he's going to pack his bags and go play his cricket or apply his trade in the United States of America, I'd get it, but that would be devastating.
No, exactly. But that's where the board have got to wake up as well. They don't hold the power the way that they used to. The PCB have wanted to bring this in for a long time, right? And they've flirted with it a couple of times. I can't believe that no lawyer has told them that this is a bad idea. It's a bad idea from PR. It's a bad idea from player management. And my guess is it's probably a bad idea legally. These players have a finite amount of time that they can make the most money possible from their careers. Lots of people get upset. Oh, he gets paid this and he gets paid this and everything. It's like, yes, they do. They also put their body on the line, and quite often they really struggle financially after they retire. There's professional athletes deserve a share of the profits of what they are making. They deserve their opportunities to make as much money as they can during their career. And if you start to limit that, I think I don't think it will work anyway, but also I think it's a terrible way of planning cricket, of running cricket, I should say.
It's even worse when you have other players who have or are set to play that third league of the year, right? So what message are you sending? And what relationship are you maintaining with the Bangladesh board, right? This is all too bad. Anyway, that brings our episode to a close. Of course, Alexander Cockburn has asked about Glenn Maxwell. We don't know enough right now, but what we do know is that he might have partied too hard. Anyway...
I don't know anything. Oh my God, I'm learning this. Anyway, I'll Google it while you end the show.
Yeah, so basically, thank you everybody in the comment section who joined us for Uncovered Part 2. As Jared mentioned, we will be splitting up Uncovered moving forward. There'll be the cricket performances and then the cricket current affairs stuff. And in the audio, that'll be split up. On YouTube, for whoever watches us live, it's the same thing still. So nothing's going to change over there. And if you liked it, like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to both this channel and Jared's other channel. We'll be back with another or 2 other episodes of Uncovered next week. But that is all for now. Goodbye.
Occasionally, I also talk about behind-the-scenes stuff. A huge thanks to everyone who has supported us on Patreon and helped us build this channel. Join our Patreon community and unlock exclusive benefits. Enjoy AMAs, live calls with me, and connect with fellow cricket enthusiasts on Discord. Express your cricket fandom with Bodyline t-shirts. Discover their extensive range of player-inspired tees, featuring cricket legends such as Murali, Warne, and Wasim. With team-themed designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds, they've got you covered